Observe the gnarled hands holding the steaming cups in the gloom. Get closer to the canvas. Notice the color of that skin. A rough, cracked, deformed texture, absolutely identical to the color of the muddy earth that those exact same fingers have just dug up. Look at the fingernails, thick and outlined with the indelible black dirt of the fields. What you see at first glance is a monumental lie. When the modern world thinks of the name Vincent van Gogh, our mind is immediately hijacked by a blinding yellow, by vibrant wheat fields, by skies that spin like galaxies in delirium, and by the plasticized myth of a misunderstood genius bathed in the luminous sun of Provence. We have been sold the light of the end of his life as a highly profitable consumer product, but the toxic, suffocating shadows that formed his psychological foundation have been deliberately hidden from us. Before the sunflowers, before museums built glass altars with his name and billionaires traded his canvases like currency, there was another Vincent, a man who systematically failed at absolutely everything he attempted, a specter who wandered the darkest, most unforgiving peripheries of society, not as an intellectual observer taking notes from a safe distance, but as just another one among the forgotten, the hungry and the broken. Today we are going to delve into his personal chiaroscuro to decipher the work that he himself, until the very last breath of his agonizing life, considered his only brutal and true masterpiece. A painting so disturbing, so aggressively honest, that high art society tried to bury it in the darkest corner of their memory, refusing to look at the mirror it held up to their hypocrisy. To understand the origin of this visual mystery, one must first feel the physical weight of a granite slab resting on the chest. Imagine being an intensely sensitive child, walking every Sunday morning toward your father's rural church, and being forced to pass a tomb in the cemetery engraved with your exact own name. Vincent van Gogh. It was the tomb of his older brother, stillborn exactly 1 year before he came into the world. From his very first breath, the young Vincent carried the terrifying ghost of being a substitute, a replacement for a perfect phantom who never had the chance to sin, to disappoint, or to fail. That existential displacement, that identity crisis carved permanently in cold stone, pushed him to seek solace away from refined, civilized people. He found refuge in wind-twisted trees, in the mud, in the silent flight of crows, and in the slow, monotonous rhythm of rural labor. By age 15, his life was already a dead-end maze, a desperate, frantic search for purpose that would lead him to crash head-on against the modern world. He saw the polished elegance of the galleries in London and Paris, the silk dresses, the crystal chandeliers, and the polite conversations of the bourgeoisie, but his spirit rejected it all with profound disgust, considering it an empty, soulless farce. He tried to sell art and failed miserably because he preferred to scare away wealthy clients by telling them the uncomfortable truth about the shallow works they were buying. He fell deeply in love and was cruelly, publicly rejected, treated as a madman who loved too intensely. And when, on the verge of a total psychological collapse, he decided to become a preacher to save souls, he did not choose a comfortable parish in a wealthy city. He chose to descend into the darkest, most dangerous, and forgotten abyss he could find in all of Europe. Let us travel to the Borinage, to the mining region of Belgium, at the absolute peak of the Industrial Revolution. Forget boring historical dates and focus on the asphyxiation. Feel the coal dust suspended in the thick air, entering your lungs with every breath, painting your insides black. Smell the sulfur, the rancid sweat, and the damp earth. Imagine the Marcaille mine, known as the most dangerous and lethal in the entire region. Every single morning, men, women, and children were lowered 700 meters into the belly of the earth in fragile wooden cages. They worked in subhuman conditions, in suffocating heat, crawling through narrow tunnels without seeing sunlight for weeks, constantly threatened by sudden explosions of fire-damp gas. In the midst of this absolute misery, where the relentless machinery of progress crushed human lives to feed the roaring furnaces of a modernized Europe, Vincent did not just preach. Vincent broke completely. He renounced every trace of civilized humanity or privilege. He gave away his warm clothes, gave away his money, abandoned his bed, and slept on the freezing dirt floor of a miserable, drafty hut alongside sick, coughing miners. He starved himself because he felt guilty eating while others suffered. They called him the Christ of the coal mine, and it was there, in that total, terrifying blackness, watching the workers emerge from the underground tunnels like ghosts covered in soot, spitting blood, and with faces carved by pure exhaustion, where Vincent's mind clicked irreversibly. He discovered a violent, undeniable beauty that the perfumed, absinthe-drinking salons of Paris completely ignored. He understood the sacred gravity of human endurance. He understood that true suffering was not poetic, romantic, or theatrical. It was dirty, ugly, and reeked of misery, and he decided with the unshakable conviction of a madman that he would be the strategist in charge of bringing that disturbing truth to the canvases of the world. When he finally turned to painting at 27, he did it out of pure vital exhaustion. He had no other alternative to keep from going mad. He wasn't looking for elegance. He didn't care about the academic proportions taught in the fine art schools. He demanded the raw truth. He spent entire winters in the village of Noenen, wandering the fields like a vagabond, drawing dozens and dozens of severed-looking peasant heads, frightening the locals who thought he was a lunatic. His first strokes were neither fluid nor beautiful. They were aggressive scars on the paper. He applied the dark oil paint with an almost sculptural density, where each brushstroke was a violent furrow in the earth, and each layer of paint carried the incalculable weight of a life of ceaseless labor. Thus we reach the spring of 1885, the exact moment when all the obsessions of his life, religion, poverty, isolation, and unyielding honesty collide on a single canvas. Let us strip this work of its myths and analyze, layer by layer, the secret code of the potato eaters. Observe the interior of this small, claustrophobic peasant cabin in Noenen. The de Groot family sits down to dinner after a day of manual labor that would physically destroy any modern man. This is not simply a genre painting meant to decorate a millionaire's dining room. It is an earthly sacrament of survival. Decode the composition. Observe the rough, splintered wooden table. Vincent has turned it into a sacred altar. The steam rising from the freshly boiled potatoes drifts toward the low, soot-stained ceiling, as if it were a pagan incense in the midst of the darkness. There is no meat, there is no wine, there are no luxuries, only the product of their own sweat, pulled directly from the dirt. Feel the oppressive lighting of the scene. A single primitive oil lamp hangs from the ceiling, casting dense, threatening shadows that envelop the family, creating a masterful, claustrophobic chiaroscuro that isolates these 5 people from the absolute void of the outside universe. The flame of that lamp is tiny, trembling, fighting for oxygen, but it is the only thing holding back the infinite night. That small light is the ultimate metaphor for human dignity, weak, surrounded by darkness, but stubbornly refusing to be extinguished. Now get closer to the faces. Look closely at them, even if it makes you deeply uncomfortable. Vincent intentionally deformed their features to emphasize their animal-like connection to the earth. Look at the protruding cheekbones, the sunken foreheads, the broad, flat noses. They look like they were carved from the very wood of the forest with a blunt axe. Observe the woman on the right pouring the dark, bitter coffee. Her eyes are wide but empty, fixed on a point that doesn't exist, displaying an exhaustion beyond the capacity of words. Notice the young girl with her back turned to us, her face entirely hidden in shadow. She represents the anonymous, endless cycle of poverty, a generation born in the dark, destined to inherit the same back-breaking labor. They do not ask for pity, They demand respect. Vincent eliminated any trace of bright, primary, or cheerful colors from his palette. He used tones that he himself described as the color of a dusty, unpeeled potato, gray tones, muddy greens, deep blacks, and browns that seem extracted directly from the mire. He did it with an honesty so brutal that it feels like a physical attack to a viewer accustomed to classical beauty. He wanted the painting itself to look as if it were painted with mud. He wanted you to feel in your own guts that those same deformed, bony, and rough hands now bringing food to their mouths are the exact same hands that dug the frozen soil to tear it from nature. Listen to the tense silence of the painting. There is no joyful conversation at that table. There is only the chewing of food, the deep breathing of tired lungs, and the clinking of cheap cups. It is the sacred silence of those who have earned the right to live one more day. Why did the author want us to feel this profound, aching discomfort? To answer this, we have to dive into Vincent's mind through the desperate letters he wrote to his brother Theo in the early hours of the morning. While painting this work, Vincent was possessed by a manic frenzy. Theo from Paris begged him to send more colorful paintings, luminous landscapes, flowers, things that high society would actually want to buy. Impressionism was the new trend. The bourgeoisie wanted light. They wanted spring gardens, beautiful women, and pastel colors. Vincent answered him with the ferocity of a cornered beast. He wrote, "If a peasant painting smells of bacon, smoke, potato steam, very well, that's not unhealthy. If a stable smells of dung, all right, that's what a stable belongs to smell of." To him, trying to beautify poverty, to dress peasants in clean clothes and soften their features so they would be pleasing to the delicate eyes of the rich, was an unforgivable betrayal. Technical perfection, the flawless anatomical proportions demanded by the academies of art, were a disgusting shallow lie if they lacked real human emotion. He didn't want to paint subjects. He wanted to paint the soul of the effort. He wanted to paint the smell of sweat and the taste of dirt. And this is where the definitive clash occurs, the moment when the art world turned its back on him, and Vincent became a legend of the shadows. When the painting finally reached Paris, it was met with brutal rejection, mockery, and horror. His own artist friends told him the characters looked like apes, that the technique was clumsy, that the colors were dirty, dead, and depressing. They demanded he lighten his palette, that he learn to paint sunlight, and although time would eventually end up pushing Vincent toward the south of France, where the sun would drive him mad and his palette would explode in the yellows and blues we all know, something inside his soul never left that dark cabin. The modern world celebrates the Van Gogh of dazzling colors, buys umbrellas, posters, and coffee mugs decorated with starry skies. They have reduced a tortured genius to a pop artist, but the hidden truth is that even in his final months of life, when his mind was completely fracturing, locked behind the thick walls of an asylum in Saint-Rémy, Vincent remembered the potato eaters as his absolute best creation. Why? Because that painting was the climax of his truth. It was the exact moment when he stopped trying to be a mere decorative artist to become a translator of pain, misery, and the human condition. Vincent van Gogh left us a hidden message in the mud of his pigments. He taught us that our existence, however rough, poor, frustrating, or overshadowed it may be, possesses an unbreakable dignity that neither time, nor society, nor darkness can ever erase. He shouted to us that true art must hurt to heal, that you must get your hands dirty with the earth to find heaven. The true light, the one that sustains humanity through its darkest hours, is not the one that blinds from the perfect sky of Provence or from the glowing screens of our ideal modern lives. The true light is the humble oil lamp, dirty with smoke, that barely manages to separate us from the infinite night, while we sit together and share our wounds in the dark. The history of art and human psychology is plagued with these disturbing secrets, with works that were hated and hidden in their time because they held up too honest a mirror to a hypocritical reality. What to the world is just an old, dark, ugly painting of peasants eating. to us is a testament to psychological survival. Before turning off this oil lamp and returning to your reality, it is fundamental to remember that the oppressive atmospheres, the oak panel textures, the dense smoke, and the hyper-realistic chiaroscuros that have visually supported this narration throughout the video have been meticulously generated by artificial intelligence tools to immerse you without distractions in this deep aesthetic journey. But carve this into your mind, never forget it. Artificial intelligence, no matter how perfect, fast, and advanced it becomes in the future, will never, under any circumstances, be able to compare to real art. No algorithm, no machine will ever be able to replicate the heartbreaking pain, the physical hunger, the romantic rejection, the incipient madness, and the trembling pulse of a man who is freezing and painting frantically to keep from dying of sadness. Human art, forged in misery, anguish, and blood, is absolutely irreplaceable because it contains the literal soul of its creator, so that you connect intimately with that raw and unfiltered truth. In the pinned comment of this video, I have left a direct link for you to go and contemplate the real painting of the Potato Eaters in all its rough, dirty, and magnificent majesty. Examine those brushstrokes, feel the weight of history. If your mind is one of those that seeks the answers deliberately hidden in plain sight, if you refuse to settle for the sugar-coated surface sold to you by history books and modern sterile galleries, it is time for you to become part of this community. Subscribe to Hidden Intellects. There are still many mysteries to decipher in the dark, many uncomfortable truths waiting to be revealed. See you in the next wakefulness, when the shadows speak again.